Chapter 7. However, Chuck Cannon took out Yvette Jordan's mobile phone, opened her WeChat, and added himself with it. Chuck's current WeChat account was a blank slate with no friends added ever since he opened this account. Yvette would never know it was Chuck's WeChat account. There must have been something wrong with Yvette's training company, otherwise, she would not have come here to drink. If she needed money, Chuck would not mind transferring it to her. After helping her accepting his WeChat friend request, Chuck left. Chuck took a shower and wanted to sleep after returning to his room. When dawn broke, he had already checked out early. He had to go to the real estate agency to settle the house procedures today. My head hurts. She tried hard and recalled someone shouting loudly. Yes, that's it, someone must have saved her, right? It must be so. Yvette gave a sigh of relief. She put on her clothes and sat on the bed. Sighing again, she decided it was probably time to transfer the ownership of her company to someone else. She didn't want to go through last night's incident again. Ding! Yvette turned on her phone as she received a WeChat message. It was actually a stranger's WeChat account, whose name was Baller. Is it really a baller? Are you awake? After seeing this message, Yvette was surprised. This person must have saved her last night and then added her on WeChat. She immediately replied, "Hey, did you save me last night?" "Well, sort of." "Thank you, do I know you?" Yvette asked. "No." "Then how can I thank you? If it weren't for you last night, I would have been..." 3 crying face emojis. "You don't have to thank me, but I have to remind you not to stay over with others in a hotel. It's too dangerous." "Thank you, there was something wrong with my company." That's why Yvette replied. The man didn't reply for 20 seconds and Yvette sighed. He probably thought that she was an easy woman, so he ignored her. However, she still thanked him in her heart and wanted to see this man. Yvette put down her mobile phone, but... Ding! The baller transferred $100,000. Yvette was dumbfounded. This guy actually transferred $100,000 to me. She was stunned and replied in a hurry, "What are you doing, baller? Isn't your company facing difficulties? Then I will transfer the money to you so you don't have to drink with others anymore." Yvette double confirmed that she did not mistakenly read the message. She took a deep breath and replied, "Thank you, baller, but you saved me last night and I haven't even thanked you. How can I take your money?" The other party did not respond. But 10 seconds. Ding! The baller transferred $100,000. Again. Yvette was completely shocked. Is this guy really a baller? If so, when did she ever know a guy like this? Yvette felt puzzled and clicked on his profile. She wanted to see his album, but she didn't find anything. Who was this guy? "Thank you, but really it's fine. I will solve my own problems." Yvette finally replied after some thinking. This man gave her $200,000 out of sudden. She couldn't accept it, and she didn't dare to accept it. Well, if you're in trouble, you can contact me. Seeing the message, Yvette put down the phone in bewilderment after replying a thanks. Who is this guy? Why is he helping her? She was full of doubts. She thought about it for a while and decided to sell out her own house. She could buy a smaller house and use the remaining money to see if she could revive her training company. After all, she only managed to buy her current house and car thanks to the money earned by this training company. She would not be contented to give up just like this. She made up her mind to pack up her things and check out. Then, she would contact the real estate agency to sell her house. Chuck looked at his mobile phone and gave a wry smile. Yvette didn't accept the money transferred to her. At least, he finally managed to become friends with Yvette, and even managed to chat with her so casually. Unfortunately, it was not a face-to-face conversation. Chuck thought to himself, if Yvette was really facing problems, she would definitely ask him for help. Then, he could help her. Soon, he got to the real estate agency. When the employee saw Chuck coming over, he immediately served him tea and gave him a seat. He had made a lot of money this month. Chuck was definitely his god of prosperity. Mr. Cannon, please wait for a moment. The owner will come soon, the employee said politely. Chuck nodded. There was nothing to worry about. After all, it was almost the holidays and there was no class this morning. However, after playing with his mobile phone for a while, he suddenly saw Yvette's car at the door. He was shocked. No way, was WeChat already so high-tech for her to be able to track him down? Don't panic, it's impossible. But why is Yvette here? Is she selling her house? Chuck took a deep breath and hurriedly said that he needed to go to the washroom before dashing inside. He carefully looked out and saw Yvette coming in with a bag. The other employees immediately served her politely. Her clothes were not cheap, so everyone could see that Yvette had purchasing power. With only a few words, the employee had Yvette sign some documents before driving off in her car. Chuck walked out and asked, what was the pretty lady doing? She wanted to sell her house. He was speechless. Was Yvette really selling her house? Is her company facing that much hardship? They didn't talk much before, so Chuck naturally didn't know her situation. He didn't expect it to be like this. Soon, the owner of the house that Chuck wanted to buy dropped by. He went out with the real estate middleman to complete some paperwork documents until late afternoon. Finally, Chuck had his own house. Mind him, a few days ago he was still fretting over what to eat, but now it felt so good having a baller as a mom. Back at the agency, Chuck asked the staff who had just returned from Yvette's house. The staff said, the pretty lady just now was selling her house, 3 rooms, 130 square meters. According to market price, it would cost about $1.2 million. She said that if she could be paid all the money at once, there could be a discount up to $50,000. That means it can be taken care of with $1.2 million. Chuck's eyes flashed. Are you interested, Mr. Cannon? The employee's eyes lit up. It was not a big deal for a person who could pay up $3 million at once to buy another house. Wait, I'll make a phone call and ask. Chuck took out his mobile phone to call his mother and it was quickly connected. Chucky. Mom, I still want some money, he said. Okay, Mom will transfer you $10 million now. His mother chuckled. Mom, I'm using it to buy a house. I didn't have enough money, so that's why, Chuck explained hesitantly. No need to give any reasons. If my son wants to spend money, just spend it. Remember, I'm your mom, I'll give you as much as you want. Chuck's eyes reddened. He never felt the warmth of parents since young, but now that he had, Chuck felt warm inside. Although it was normal for moms to be like this, he still felt like he was dreaming. Thank you, Mom. Silly child, I'll transfer it to you now. The call ended in less than 10 minutes. Chuck received a message on his mobile phone, indicating that he had just received $10 million. Together with the remaining money in his account, he now had about $11.3 million. Chuck took a deep breath and walked up to the employee before announcing, "Call her now and say that someone wants to buy her house." Chapter 8. What? Someone wants to buy my house so soon? And it's gonna be paid in full? Yvette Jordan was stunned after receiving the phone call from the real estate agency. Isn't it too fast? The news was just released in the morning. Yes, a gentleman has taken a fancy to your house. If it's convenient for you, please drop by so we can finish up the transfer procedure tomorrow, the agent said. Yvette felt like she received a gift from heaven. Despite repeated confirmation, she was surprised. Her house was really sold in one morning. When she bought this house, she only bought it for $6,000. In just one morning, she had already made hundreds of thousands of dollars. She thought that it would take at least a month to sell the house, but she didn't expect it to be sold so fast. Okay, please take the buyer to the real estate bureau tomorrow. I'll meet you there, Yvette said. No problem. See you tomorrow morning. Seeing the real estate agency hanging up the phone, Chuck Cannon breathed a sigh of relief. What did she say? Very pleased. The agent smiled and said. He was even more polite to Chuck. Chuck, who looked extremely normal and low-profiled, had bought 2 houses in his agency in 2 days. He would be a big customer in the future, so he couldn't afford to offend him. That's great. Please help me complete the transfer procedure tomorrow, Chuck replied. He couldn't let Yvette know that he was the one who bought her house, or she might not want to sell it. Me? Mr. Cannon, this transfer has to be done by yourself. The agent was surprised because he had never encountered such a request before. Please replace me, I will give you the money tomorrow. You can transfer the house under your name first and then transfer it to me, Chuck said. The agent was stunned. Was there such a way? However, he would receive a lot of commission after selling this house, so it was worth going through the troublesome matters. No problem, I'll call you tomorrow morning, the agent said. Okay. Chuck gave him a deposit of $100,000 and went out. Mr. Cannon is really rich. After Chuck left, several agents expressed their envy. Yes, although Mr. Cannon wears cheap clothes and looks like a loser, he is generous. He spent more than $5 million to buy houses at once. His assets should be more than 50 million. That many? He's still a student at this age, isn't he? Student? He's obviously a rich kid, isn't he? I really can't see that. Are rich kids so low-key? Now? Who knows? Chuck was waiting for a taxi while his mind was wandering. How would Yvette react if she knew he was the one who bought her house? Maybe she would be surprised. Maybe. Chuck shook his head. Now he was ready to go to the furniture store to buy some furniture. After all, the house had been transferred today, but the original owners had moved out with their furniture. Fortunately, no renovation was needed as the house was still relatively new, so he could just buy some furniture and move in. However, Chuck felt that it was troublesome to go back and forth and thus thought of buying a car. It felt so different when he had money, he could change his mind whenever he wanted. He took a taxi to the Ford's automobile store. After attaining his driving license for a few months, he had already thought of buying a BMW. Now, of course, he was heading straight to the BMW Ford's automobile store. However, Chuck was not dressed attractive enough to get the attention of the staff in the store. They glanced at him a few times and their eyes were full of disdain. Nobody bothered to greet him at all. They were guessing that this person came in just to have a look around the cars for fun. Chuck took a fancy to a big BMW, but he didn't know what it was called. Thinking that it belonged to a certain series, he walked over and saw a saleswoman. Chuck asked, "Hello, what car is this? How much is it?" The saleswoman looked at Chuck with distaste. She didn't want to talk to him at all and just walked away with no intention of responding to him. This poor loser was asking her the price of the car although he didn't even know what its name was. Chuck was a little distraught, and could only try to open the car door and take a look inside himself. However, he felt awkward as that door was locked so he could only have a look outside. The manager of this store glanced at Chuck and asked the intern, Charlotte Yates, to come over. "Manager, you called me?" Charlotte greeted him cautiously. The manager pointed to Chuck, who was examining the car. "Go serve the man who just walked in. This sort of person is just taking a look at cars, they will never have the ability to buy the cars. You can practice serving him so that your communication skills can improve. After all, we can't let you, an intern, to greet guests with the ability to purchase cars. It's best to practice on such a person with no money as it won't cause any loss to the store. Go." "Yes, manager." Charlotte calmed herself down and walked over. The manager reminded her, "Remember, be careful and don't let him touch anything. He can't afford to compensate if he leaves some scratches on the cars." "Yes, manager, I know." Charlotte nodded and walked over to Chuck with a smile. The manager and the other salesmen were too lazy to bother. They didn't even pay attention at Chuck, who looked like the shameless type of person who would enter the store to check out the cars but not buy anything. "Hello, are you interested this car?" Charlotte smiled and asked in a sweet voice. "Yes, which series is this car from?" Chuck breathed a sigh of relief. Finally someone paid attention to him. "Yes, this is the luxurious version of the BMW 7 Series." Wheelbase Charlotte was about to introduce the details of the car as practiced, but before she could finish her sentence, Chuck interrupted her and asked directly, "How much is it?" Charlotte was stunned momentarily. "Well, this is the top car of the BMW 7 Series. It costs $2,480,000. Okay, I'll take it. Do you have any available cars in stock?" Chuck asked. "What? What did you say?" Charlotte Yates was stunned. "I said I've made up my mind. Is there any of it available currently?" Chuck repeated weakly. Didn't he seem like he was going to buy a car? "Are you sure?" Charlotte subconsciously rose her voice, which immediately attracted the other salespeople in the store. What happened? Could it be, this guy damaged the car? Their salesmen all looked at them. The manager frowned and could only walk over, muttering unhappily under his breath, "I told her to be careful. Why did she let this kid touch the car? Can he even afford to pay for the damages?" Sigh. "What's wrong?" The manager tried his best to remain calm. If Chuck had no money, he would immediately call the police. "Manager, this gentleman here said he wanted to order this car," Charlotte said in a daze. She couldn't come back to her senses. The manager was stunned, his eyebrows knotting themselves further. Not a bit glad, he examined Chuck from head to toe for a few times. Unsatisfied although he had let this person come in to take a look, and even trying to make a joke, he was unhappy as he thought that this had gotten too far. What? Did I hear it right? This guy, dressed in drags, has the money to buy a BMW? What's more, a BMW of the very highest caliber. I think he'd better to buy a bicycle. That's right. Doesn't he feel embarrassed when he hears this price? The other salesmen all sneered. They had seen too many people like Chuck, just simply claiming to buy it. They wouldn't be surprised if he tried to find an excuse to leave later. "Sir, are you kidding?" The manager was impatient. He wanted to throw Chuck out. Chuck looked at him, took out his card, and gave it directly to Charlotte. "Do you have ready available stock?" "Yes." Charlotte nodded in reflex. "Then I'll buy it, swipe my card." Chuck replied calmly. Charlotte was really confused. This was her first day at work and she didn't know how to deal with it, so she could only ask the manager, "What should I do?" Since he wants to buy it, then swipe his card. Currently, this car has a discount of $30,000. Since he has money, then he can pay $2,450,000. The manager sneered. He couldn't understand why Chuck had the courage to present his credit card after asking about the price of the BMW. Will he feel embarrassed of himself only when the machine states that there is insufficient amount in his bank account? Well, since you're so pretentious, let reality give you a big slap in the face then. He had been in the car business for so many years, and he had never seen anyone enter a BMW store to buy a car in clothes that cost less than $100. Chuck was definitely the first one. The manager sneered and said, "Go and swipe it." Charlotte brought Chuck's card over to the counter in a daze. She didn't want to issue an invoice first and directly swiped the card. Haha, it's the first time that I've seen such a person. This kid must be playing truth or dare. Me neither. Will he feel embarrassed if the card can't be used later? I don't think so. He's so thick-skinned. Why would he feel embarrassed? The salesman at the scene laughed mockingly while the manager glared at Chuck. He waited for Charlotte to inform him that the balance of this card was insufficient. In less than 30 seconds, Charlotte trotted over. The manager glanced at her and said, "Return him the card and ask him to get out." "No, manager." Charlotte replied breathlessly, "Manager, his bill was paid. That $2,450,000 has been paid." Chapter 9. What? The manager was shocked, and the other salesmen gathered around them in surprise. How could it be possible? This poor boy actually took out $2,400,000? Are you sure? The manager asked in a serious tone. He knew that Charlotte Yates would not dare to joke with him at this moment, but he still asked because he couldn't believe that he had misjudged Chuck Cannon. "Yes, I'm sure." Charlotte was also flabbergasted just now, but the credit card machine wouldn't lie. There was no insufficient of balance as expected, and the payment was successfully made in one swipe. She had thought that it was an illusion, but it turned out real. Oh gosh! The manager was shocked. He really bought it? I really can't believe that he is actually so rich when he is dressed like this. Are the rich people so low-key now? Who knows, it's probably just these rich kids and their weird antics. This must be one of the ways for them to have fun. Sigh, if I had known that this person was so rich. Should have answered him properly when he asked me the price of the car just now. Then the commission of this car will be mine, sigh. The saleswoman's heart from just now was full of regret, but it was no use regretting it anymore. He had already bought the car. The manager's attitude took a 360-degree turn and he smiled politely at Chuck. "May I know your surname, sir?" "My surname is Cannon. Please help me settle the insurance and the temporary car number plate as well. I'll take the car out later," Chuck said to Charlotte after answering the manager. Charlotte nodded robotically. So this meant that she had sold a car on her first day of her internship? She felt as if she was dreaming, but this dream was real. Seeing as Chuck ignored the manager immediately felt awkward. He winked at Charlotte as a sign of asking her to deal with Chuck properly since he was now an important customer of theirs. Charlotte nodded and brought Chuck to finish up the necessary procedures. Since the money had been paid, the rest would be quick. An hour later, Chuck drove out of the Ford's automobile store slowly. He planned to go to the car management office the day after tomorrow to install the car plate. Before he left, he also added Charlotte's WeChat account. Chuck didn't think too much since it was the first time he had bought a car. He could get her help on WeChat if he had run into any problems while maneuvering the car. To be honest, it was the first time Chuck had driven such an extravagant car, so he was extremely tense. However, he definitely knew he paid well for the car, as even though his speed on the road was slow, the other cars didn't dare to honk at him. Well, not everyone can afford to drive such a car after all. Chuck deliberately drove to a road with no cars to practice driving around, parking and reversing a few times. He was ready to drive to the furniture store to buy some furniture when he became more comfortable with his car. Just as he was about to leave, Yvette Jordan called. Chuck's phone was connected to the car and it took him some time to find the button to pick up the call on the steering wheel. As soon as he answered it, Yvette's impatient voice blasted, "What are you doing? Why did you pick up the phone so slowly?" Chuck sighed. He could only say that he didn't hear it just now. "Come home and pack up all your things before tonight." "Hey! Are you deaf?" "No, why do you ask me to pack my stuff? I sold my house. Do you expect me to clean up the rubbish that you left behind?" Yvette replied coldly. "All right." After hanging up the phone, Chuck drove home silently. Since Yvette's house would be his starting tomorrow, it didn't make any difference if he cleaned up his things or not. However, since Yvette called him, it was better for him to go back. As soon as he started driving, he received a WeChat notification. Chuck took a look and instantly felt faint as the message was from Yvette. "What are you doing, baller? I'd like to treat you to a meal to thank you. Are you free?" Chuck replied. "I'm waiting for an annoying person to come over and pack up his things. After that, I'll be free, so let's have dinner together." Chuck smiled bitterly. He knew that the annoying person she was talking about was himself. "I'm not free." Chuck could only reply like this. He didn't want Yvette to know that it was him who saved her yesterday. "Ah? It doesn't matter. When do you have time then?" "Sorry, I would not be free recently." "Well, okay, let's talk when you may available." "Yep." At this moment, Yvette sat on the sofa and kept clicking on the profile of this baller. She was a little disappointed. Why didn't he post any photos? She felt that he didn't really want to talk to her. Did he think of her as a flirtatious and easy girl? Yvette sighed helplessly. She really wanted to know how the man who saved her last night and even transferred $200,000 to her looked. Would he be a very handsome person? Yvette was curious, but when she remembered that Chuck would come back soon, she went downstairs to buy a big bag so that he could take away all the garbage in the house. The road to Yvette's residential area was not easy to drive through, especially with such a big car. Chuck took a long time to park into the garage cautiously as he was a newbie when it came to driving. However, just as he got out of the car and was ready to head upstairs, he heard Yvette's voice. He was immediately shocked. "How many times do I have to tell you? You should be observant and knowledgeable. Why are you leaning so close to other people's car? This kind of car pretty sure costs at least $1 million onwards. If you scratch it, you'll never be able to pay for the compensation," Yvette scolded sharply. He had only picked up $2,000 and he probably only had a few $100s left. How could he be able to pay back the owner of this car if he damaged it? Chuck smiled dryly and didn't say anything. Yvette was too lazy to say anything more. She stuffed the big bag into Chuck's hand and said, "Take all your garbage away." Chuck nodded and went upstairs with the bag. Previously when he left, he had already took back whatever he could with him, so the things left here were literally trash. After packing for an hour, the big bag was fully loaded and he dragged it downstairs. Seeing him panting out of exhaustion, Yvette frowned. She took her car key and followed him out. "You have too many things with you, it'll be difficult if you drive alone. Where do you live? 3 send you back." "There's no need for that. I have." Chuck stopped in a hurry. "What do you have? Money for a taxi?" Yvette frowned even deeper. "Sort of." Chuck didn't say much. "Sort of? I think you can only live luxuriously for a few more days with the money you picked up." Yvette didn't want to talk too much, so she followed him downstairs. She planned to go out for some food and see if there were any houses for rent. She wanted to buy a smaller house, but it was not something that she could get in such a short time. She could only rent a house first. However, as soon as they went downstairs, he heard someone cursing. "Whose car is this? Being so arrogant just because rich? You can't just park in other people's parking space even if you are rich." Chuck thought, "Oh crap! We need to buy parking spaces in this residential area." And most of them were already bought by someone. He wasn't paying attention when he was parking his car and probably parked his car in someone else's parking space. As expected, when he went out, he saw a man with a pair of glasses shouting loudly. The man was looking into the window angrily while holding his mobile phone. Chuck was startled when he saw that the man was looking for a number to call. However, he remembered that fortunately, there was no mobile phone number displayed on the car. He didn't have the time to do that. The annoyed man walked around the car a few times and didn't see a number, almost resorting to kicking the door. Chuck's heart skipped a beat and his fists slowly tightened. Anyone would feel distressed if their newly bought car was kicked. However, the man knew that this car was very expensive and was certainly a car that no ordinary people could afford. He didn't dare to touch it, so he could only mutter, "Hey, what kind of person is this?" Not only do they simply park their car, they don't even leave their number. I'll head out to buy something. If the car hasn't been moved when I'm back, I'll smash it. Chuck heaved a sigh of relief when he heard the last sentence being yelled out. It was likely that the man wanted the owner of the car to hear it. The man got into his car and drove off. Yvette glanced at Chuck's car and asked him, "Didn't you see whose car it belonged to when you came over?" "I didn't see it." He shook his head. "The car is a good car, but it's not right to park it wherever he wants." Yvette went to her car, opened the door and got in. She asked, "You really don't need a ride?" "There's no need for that. I'll just take a taxi," Chuck said. "Whatever. But let me give you one last word of advice, you'll never have a good future if you continue acting like this." Yvette was too lazy to say anything else to him and drove away. Chuck scratched his nose and thought to himself, future? Now that he was a rich guy, he already had a wonderful future right ahead of him. After confirming that she had left the residential area, Chuck pressed the car key and opened the trunk to put the bag in. Then he drove out slowly. However, as soon as he came out, he broke out in a cold sweat as he saw Yvette's car turning back. She had probably forgotten something. They would definitely meet up if this continued. Oh no, he would be seen by Yvette. Chapter 10. Chuck Cannon was very worried. If Yvette Jordan knew that he had bought this car, what would she do? He didn't want her to know now. However, Chuck's worry was obviously unnecessary. Yvette drove very fast. They passed by in a flash of light and she did not even look at him at all. It seemed that she never thought that he would be able to afford this car. He breathed a sigh of relief and stepped on the gas pedal to speed up. Yvette glanced at the rearview mirror with a cold look. She was a little confused. This car is one of the top luxury cars in its series, isn't it? It costs more than $2 million. Whose car is it? She had been living in this area for a long time, and she knew almost all the cars. Someone must have bought a new car. However, such an extravagant car cost a lot, so who could afford it? As she pondered about it, Yvette had already returned to her residential area. She had come back to retrieve her cell phone as she realized she forgot to bring it out when she came out just now. Yet, she didn't see Chuck, who was supposedly heaving a large bag downstairs. She frowned to herself and muttered, "Did he take a taxi and leave so soon?" Still taking a taxi in such a money-lacking situation? Hopeless of him. Yvette shook her head coldly. Chuck drove his BMW to the furniture store. He didn't want to buy any over-the-top furniture since practicality is more important. However, others didn't think so. Driving such an amazing car, the saleswoman had recommended the most expensive furniture for Chuck. A bed which cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a sofa that cost around $70,000 or $80,000. Chuck sighed. Yes, he had money now, but he couldn't spend it recklessly. In the end, Chuck spent $200,000 for 2 beds, a sofa, cabinet, etc. They were almost done. They could be delivered by tomorrow. Chuck took the receipt and walked out of the furniture store. But when he went out, he saw his classmate Queenie Carson, who had a good relationship with Chuck. He still remembered how she defended him the last time when he said he had picked up some money. However, he was slightly frustrated as she had somehow accidentally scratched his new car with her bicycle. Queenie was visibly scared that her face turned pale. She had been wiping the scratched area with wet tissue while tears welled up in her eyes. But how could the scratch be covered up with tissue? Queenie realized this and couldn't help crying. Her family was very ordinary, but she definitely recognized such a popular brand like BMW. She cried because she couldn't afford to pay for it. Chuck couldn't stand it any longer and hurried over. "Queenie, what are you crying for?" When Queenie saw that there was someone she knew, she stood up and cried even more anxiously. She couldn't stop her tears from flowing. "Ah! Chuck, I hit someone's car. I didn't notice that I accidentally hit it when I was riding my bicycle. I've been trying to remove it with tissue, but I can't. What should I do? What should I do?" Seeing Queenie crying so sadly, Chuck couldn't bear it. He really wanted to say, "It's okay, this is my car." However, there would be some trouble if he said so. Queenie would certainly ask him where he got the money from. It was not easy to answer. His mother was still abroad and had not come back yet. This is a BMW, which is definitely very expensive. It may cost over $300,000. What should I do? She was so anxious that she burst into tears. Chuck felt helpless. If he told her that the car was worth $2,400,000, she would probably cry for a whole day. "It's just a small matter, people won't notice it." "It's okay. Let's go," Chuck said. "I know, I have to admit that I have done something wrong. I will pay for it, but I have to pay in installments. I will beg the owner of the car to let me do so. Just don't look for my family." She bit her lip and sobbed with tears in her eyes. Chuck stood powerless. Queenie was a good person with principles and virtues. She would definitely admit what she had done wrong. But who would she admit to in this situation? "Chuck, can you accompany me to wait for the owner to come over? I'm afraid to be alone," Queenie whispered in a pleading tone. "Okay, let's wait." Chuck smiled and pulled her to sit down on the ground next to him. "Thank you. It's okay. By the way, what are you doing here?" "I was looking if there's any part-time job here." Oh, after a moment of silence, Queenie's thoughts started to drift away. Will this owner be very fierce? What if he wants to beat me up? Will he? It's okay. Seeing that Queenie was about to cry again, Chuck hurried to comfort her. "How I wish the owner of this car was someone new. I would be able to ask him to let me pay in installments. But now, this is a stranger, I'm afraid he won't agree." "Yes, he will. Don't think too much. If you are sincere, others will definitely agree." I hope so. Chuck waited with Queenie until 10 o'clock in the evening and the shops nearby were all closed. As it was already dark, she was even more afraid. Chuck could only say, "The owner has not come after a long time. I don't think he will come. Let's go back." But Queenie thought for a moment and took out a pen and paper from her small backpack. She wrote sorry on the paper, and notified that she was willing to take responsibility and so on. Finally, she left her phone number and carefully stuffed the paper underneath the wiper. Only then did she let out a sign of relief. "I hope the owner of the car will call me, I'll compensate for it," she said. "Yes." Chuck nodded, but he certainly would not call her. He would ask the saleswoman Charlotte Yates later and see how much it cost. He would solve it by himself. "Thank you for waiting with me for so long, let me treat you to supper." "But I don't have much money, is $50 enough for the both of us?" Queenie looked at Chuck seriously and said in a small but sincere voice. "I'll treat you," Chuck said with a smile. "No, you've been with me for so long, so I have to treat you." "What do you want to eat?" "Well, it's up to you." "Then, how about noodles?" Queenie asked. Chuck was okay with it, so they went to the nearby noodle restaurant. Chuck was hungry and felt much more comfortable after eating a bowl of noodles. Queenie was in a better mood, but she was still worried. She probably was still thinking about the compensation. Halfway through the meal, Chuck received a phone call from Laura Jean, which was unexpected. Chuck was not surprised. After all, Laura paid more than $6,000 yesterday. "Hey, is this Chuck? I'm sorry about what happened yesterday. I'll treat you to dinner and apologize." "Are you free now?" Laura asked in a sweet voice. Of course, Chuck would not be fooled. "I don't have time. I have to work part-time tomorrow." Ran out of money so soon? Laura was full of disdain, but she was even angrier. If he really had no money, then what would happen to the $6,000 she was forced to pay yesterday? She definitely couldn't fill the financial gap in her pocket money, and she absolutely had to find Chuck to get it back. "Of course. It's all right. I'll treat you to dinner. Only the two of us," Laura said. Chuck was surprised. Just him and Laura? Indeed, Laura was still very beautiful, with a curvy body size and sexy fashion sense as well. They were all in the same class, and it was inevitable that he would see something when she bowed her head or bent down. Chuck did not deny that he had seen it before. However, he had no interest in such a woman. "How about your boyfriend?" Chuck asked. "We broke up just yesterday. I'm really sad. Can you accompany me?" "Please." Laura sneered. Conrad Lee, her boyfriend, held Laura by his side and kept touching her, with a sinister smile on his face. "Break up? But I really don't have the time." "You can find someone else. It's all right. It doesn't matter if you don't have time tonight. We can meet the day after tomorrow or tomorrow. Just let me know the time and I'll be there." We will see. Okay, I'm hanging up. But don't tell others that I broke up with my boyfriend. I'm afraid that they will mock me. Okay. As she hung up the phone, Laura exclaimed defeatedly. I can't believe he didn't take the bait. Why don't you go and flirt with him tomorrow? Give him a taste of forbidden lust first, and he'll ask you out himself. Conrad thought for a moment and said. Are you crazy? Asking me to flirt with him? How disgusting will it be? I don't even want to see him, and you want me to flirt with him? Laura was angry. What else can we do? If you don't flirt with him, he'll never take the bait. If he doesn't take the bait, who can we ask for the $6,000? But... damn Chuck, it's an advantage for him. Laura stamped her feet. Well, for $6,000, we can only sacrifice a little. Conrad said and started to play tricks with Laura. Chuck and Queenie came out from the noodle shop. All of a sudden Queenie cried out, and Chuck asked what happened. It's 11 o'clock, the hostel's gate is closed. What should we do? Queenie was anxious. Chuck used to live with Yvette. He didn't stay in the dormitory, but he knew that the gates of the school's dormitory was closed at 11 o'clock sharp. It was true that she couldn't access it now. Chuck didn't think of this just now. He could only say inadvertently, why don't we get a room to sleep tonight? It was estimated that the furniture could only be moved to the house tomorrow. Chuck had already planned to book a room for today, so he said so on impulse, but it probably wasn't something decent to be said to girls. Would Queenie agree?